Welcome to the FARG Motorpool channel. This is our last video of 2024, and this is something I did a while ago in which I travelled to the Sahara desert in my faithful Jeep and back, and this is the story of how it went. There are a few trials and tribulations along the way since they're working on the Jeep, and we'll cover those off as we crack on. So, why did I want to go to the Sahara? Well, in fact, I just wanted to go to any desert and I wanted to drive my Jeep, or a red Jeep, across that desert as Tintin did in Hergé's Adventures of the Black Gold, one of my favourite stories. So, to do that, I had some available time and I decided to buy a Jeep. I didn't buy a World War II Willys Jeep, we actually bought a 1961 Hotchkiss M201, so it's based on the Willys Jeep, it's very similar. But I knew my way around these, so that made a logical choice. I bought the Jeep in Brittany, brought it back across the channel and started the restoration. As you can see here, I was putting it into red and put on a raw bar because I knew that it was going to be pretty challenging off-road over in Africa. Rebuilt the engine, new spark plugs, new leads, new carburettor, new fuel lines, new brakes, etc. Quite a lot of work went into it, and there I am, looking very happy with it, ready to rock and roll. So I was able to use it for a few weeks before I was having to set off. But unfortunately, during my test period, the gearbox failed on me. I tried to source one, but there was no chance of me getting it to me and into that Jeep and ready for me to leave, and which was just a number of days. So therefore, I had to take the sad decision that I was going to have to leave the red restored Jeep behind and find some other transport. So there it is, sat on my driveway looking very forlorn, but it just wasn't going to be going with me. So therefore, I went to the back of my garage and I pulled out a Jeep that I'd been hanging on to for a very, very long time. And this is one that I bought in auction in the late 90s. And this was going to have to be pressed into service. So it was brought to the front of the garage and we started doing work on it. I really didn't have the time to repaint it into red, so it was going to have to go as green. So I was just checking out here the clutch and different elements of the engine. We managed to get it all back together. There's a roll cage on under that canvas, you can just about see. And I put double tyres on the back, and they were held with inside what was described as a bustle rack, so therefore I could carry extra equipment. But that's putting a lot of weight on the rear of that poor little Jeep, as we found out the problems that created later. You can see that I've put on a CB radio area as well, Ariel, because I had to be able to speak to other people in the caravan, or i.e. the number of other vehicles I was travelling with. So I named the Jeep Milou, which is French for snowy, as a nod towards Tintin. And I had a farewell party with all my friends with the theme of being characters from Hergé's Adventures of Tintin. I think I could see someone there with a lamp. I think it wasn't meant to be a lamp from the living room. I think it was meant to be one that you rub and a genie comes out. But never mind. There's our travel all the way from Bristol, down through France, all the way through Spain, across on a quick ferry from Gibraltar into Morocco, down onto the Moroccan border with Algeria, a possibly pop over into Algeria for a little bit, then back, all looping all the way around, back up the coast and back to the UK. So I set off and I didn't really take many photographs as I was just too busy driving. So here was a quick bathroom break in Spain, about the only picture I've got of that entire journey down to Gibraltar. The Jeep performed extremely well. It was great MPG. It was just physically exhausting. 3 days of solid driving, and I arrived in Gibraltar. There we are, to go and pick up my co-driver. No, that's not my co-driver, that's a monkey. And here is a shipwreck. It was just random things I spent my time looking at in Gibraltar until the time for the ferry to leave. So there we are, quite apprehensively, we're mounting onto the boat and sailing over to North Africa. Very cramped, all squeezed in there, but it was a very fast boat and we got across in hardly any time. Landing on the other side, it's very similar to what Spain looks like, and it's because it does belong to Spain, some of Morocco, and we travelled down to the border. We couldn't really film at the border crossing over, but it was absolute mayhem. There's me trying to get a sneaky shot there, but we were just surrounded by people trying to sell us things and help us out, probably a nefarious help, to be honest. Filling up there with fuel, and you can see I've put a goat skin on the seats to try and help me last over the thousands of miles I was about to drive. So here I am, you can see under the arch, I was in Morocco at last, over the border. First thing we went to have a look at was a Roman settlement, just to sort of get settled into and looking at the maps for the journey. So that was 1,560 miles I'd already driven. To be honest, I was incredibly tired, but it was great to relax, be a bit of a tourist before we started hitting the trail. There I am in quite a, I would suggest, a Western outfit. That does change later on in the journey, but the Jeep's looking pretty good. It's performing very well. I'm very happy with it, but we really didn't know what was ahead of me. As I said, I was very touristy to start with, very much in my Western outfit, and by the end of the journey, that's me again, looking like a gnome. In fact, it's absolutely freezing cold in my traditional Moroccan dress. But anyway, let's get back to the story. Up we went, up and up and up and up into the Atlas Mountains. So that's a climb of over sort of 2,000 metres. I think it was nearly did 3 in total, and it was just this constant winding road left and right with these lorries barrelling down the road towards us. Very dangerous, but we're in constant contact with the vehicle in front, as there was a few of us in convoy, or as we describe as a caravan. So now we're up on top of the Atlas, very thin air. If you actually jumped out here and ran along, you'd be out of breath quite quickly. You have a farmer looking at us, wondering what the heck's going on. He probably hasn't seen a Willys Jeep for quite a few years. And you can see we're being followed behind by the vehicle. Another one, it's in the convoy. So this is really good. Got lots of people around to help us if there were problems. And we're just travelling over the top of the Atlas. You can see they've had a bit of rain there as well. There's lots of villages, there's people sort of clinging to the side of the hills. And you can see up there those cedar trees. The Atlas are famous for, and you can see sort of bridges have been washed out, etc. But we made our way slowly but surely until we got to the very heights. Did sort of bump into a lot of children. They would appear from nowhere nearly all the time, and each of them were all asking for financial support. So we used to throw them bits and bobs as we went past. But at the end of the day, we were just on a mission. You can see here monkeys sat up there in the top right-hand corner of the picture on the trees running about, which is great to see, wild monkeys. And this first bit of off-roading was a bit of a challenge, but it was nothing compared to what we were going to hit later. But you can see we've got our joyful naivety at the moment looking around. Sorry, there's no stabilisation on any of the camera work. It was an early camera we had, so apologies for that. So there I am. What happened now? Fell number 2. It all went Pete Tong. The brakes started locking on. It was simply because we were going up and down so many times that they were just sort of gave up. So we had to strip all the drums down, take all the brakes off, bleed the system down, put new brakes on that I'd brought with me. Luckily, there we are. We had to dig the ground out to get the wheel to spin because it was quite difficult for us to get it off the ground with that sort of Land Rover jack. And there we are, back on the road again. There I am, just jumped in, I think, feet hanging out. And off we go. Notice the bustle rack's gone. We lost that on the way, and so did the second tire. But off we go. And the first thing we noticed, there was an enormous amount of rain as we started descending, coming out of the Atlas Mountains. Here's sort of a bridge or a road's just been completely washed away. There was actually an upside down lorry over to the left with people apparently still in it. It was just quite an eye-opener seeing how much of the infrastructure had been destroyed by the rains. So there's quite a lot of water to get through. Here we go, and this is sort of the street into one of the villages. It's absolutely awash right up to the axle, so we really had to take our time going through that. You would have thought we were in a very hot country aiming for the Sahara. We wouldn't be driving through so much mud, but it's just the nature of it in their winter. So you can see us here wading through. We had sort of sand tyres on, which is great, 4-wheel drive. Jeep didn't flutter, have any issues. Lovely bit of kit. We're sort of entering into sort of the rough ground, I would call it. So this is the pre-Saharan foothills, and there we go. It's really, really rough. I think I'll make a comment now to the camera about how bad it is. We're being absolutely rattled to bits, and this went on for, well, days off-road. Yeah, very hard. After 2 days of it, my wrists were in a mess, and bouncing up and down on that seat. Other places were a mess as well. But anyway, we've got there. That's me, very proudly sitting just before entering the Sahara Desert proper, sat on the Jeep thinking about how pleased I was to have got that far. You can see here now what we need to do is negotiate these lower hills till we get down onto the flat, and the road was just relentless. I didn't think it could get any worse. This is the sort of material that we were driving over. It was completely shredding tyres, vehicles, and people should you start tumbling over on it. But the Jeep did extremely well. As we said, we call it the mountain goat. It lived up to its name. It just handled these without a problem. A lot of rattling, a lot of banging. Then we had to do a lot of work along the way. You can see us here. And what we're doing is with the fuel lines had actually rattled loose, so we were tightening them up and just checking the inside of the engine as well. You see spare spark plugs there we're putting in, a spare coil, etc. Back to driving, it was like an oven. Doesn't look it in the photographs, but we're driving at very hot temperatures and there's quite a lot of dust around. So we're here with a windscreen down, which probably wasn't the greatest idea, to be absolutely honest. But I was trying to emulate those pictures I'd seen in those early Tintin books. And here is a road. Just look at it. It would be a modicum of soft sand and then just this horrible, horrible stone. So we've paused now before we go into sort of the Sahara proper. So a few other vehicles have joined our caravan, and we're right on the edge here of the foothills looking down into the desert. Jeep's looking a little bit worse for wear there at the moment. But you can see we put an expansion tank on the front to start handling the increases in temperature. So after a nice pause, off we set, and now the roads were getting a little bit better. The only problem was driving through wadis, so there's a lot of dried up riverbeds. You bounce into one side and out the other, and it really wasn't doing our suspension very good because we were travelling at some modicum of speed to just simply try and cover the distance. Also, there was a lot of dust around that was being kicked up by vehicles in front of us, and so therefore we got to sort of more or less the front of the caravan to keep us out of the dust. You can see there with the windscreen down, which wasn't the greatest idea. Little grab handle there for my co-driver, and there we are. We're now in the soft sands of the dune desert, and I'm looking still pretty pleased with myself, but it just got harder from there. Now we've got soft sand to deal with. The heat was just intense. The dust was just everywhere, and the vehicle wasn't very happy. It wasn't to do with the engine. It was just simply there's something going on at the back of the Jeep. We'll have a look at what that is in a moment. So we're just here clearing the filter. It's obviously pulling a lot of dust at the moment. So we put a pre-filter on the actual supplied filter to try and stop the dust from getting into the system. There it is there, sort of taped on. This is actually off of, I think it's a sort of a Fiat oil filter, but we've put that on just to try and pre-filter because we were just bashing the dust out of that air filter constantly. Back on the road and off we go. I'm not looking very happy there because something's not right at the back on the suspension. We can feel it. It seemed to sort of be moving around a lot, left and right and up and down, and we had to stop and have a look, and there we go. Can you see the shackles are completely flat? They're obviously meant to be bowed. They've just absolutely sort of given up the ghost, and the shock absorbers have been doing the suspension's work, and they've just both popped on both sides. So that's absolutely running with the fluid. So we had no shock absorbers, and the springs were shot. So we had to make a detour into the local town. When we got there, it was on a Sunday. I really didn't think we were going to get anything done. And there was this little sort of 1950s garage that was open, and we all paused to have sort of fluids changed and everything checked out. And I asked if they could have a look at my Jeep to see what they could do. So this is their sort of 1950s, it felt like, garage. And here's the crew. They worked absolutely like stink all night on my Jeep to try and get it ready for the next morning. When I arrived to pick the Jeep up, after I'd gone off and got a good night's sleep, it looks like this. The mountain goat had gone from quite a sort of civilized looking Jeep, and now they'd finished with it, it looks like the mountain goat, which is the nickname they'd given it. And you can see there, they've really ramped up the suspension on the vehicle to take the weight. These are the springs underneath have been retempered. Can you see that third one down? A massive strengthener's gone in, and shock absorbers must have been off of a lorry, have gone on there. So the whole vehicle actually sat sort of very high at the back, but my goodness, they knew their stuff. That absolutely was perfect for the continued hard drive that we had ahead of us. So that's the end of part one. There's a part two. Do join me for that. In part two, we will be reaching what I would call the sand dunes for proper. It's good fun out there in that soft sand. You can see one of the crew there trying to make it. So we've got to deal with soft sand. Always a challenge. Absolute and utter exhaustion. Not a great photograph there. Didn't come out very well, did it? so it's Timbuktu, you can see is off to our left. A lot of hard driving through very hot environment, and sort of a tragedy towards the end on a coastal road. And you can see we've nearly lost this Land Rover in a raging sea. So join me for part 2 and we'll go through that. And so therefore, ta-ta for now.